Hey everyone, Raptor Spank here, and today we have Metacheck, March 9th. This show where I look at the meta and talk about some decks I find interesting, as well as just generally where I feel the meta is right now. So, no patch this week, nothing to talk about on that, and that will factor into our meta topic, but let's start with an update on the deck from last week's On the Grind, which is Sandphemerals, Azir Hecarim, Ephemeral Aggro, essentially. Update, a little bit sad, played a bunch of games, played 12 games, went 4-8, so a 33% win rate, which brings the overall to 16-15, a 52% win rate. A little bit of kernel of good news here, though. I did a lot of experimenting over the past weekend with the deck, essentially, so it's a little bit disingenuous to say it went 4-8 because it really depends. Different versions lost a bunch, some did alright, and so I messed with the list quite a bit. And in fact, the most recent iteration I've only played 2 games on, but they were both wins. Now, one of the things that's important here is that most of the losses were to a bunch of random decks, like Deep Monsters once, Trundle, Lissandra, Field of Rush. DF Fiora was a win, I think, but played that. Shyvana, Aurelian Soul lost to that, lost the mirror match to Sandphemerals at one point. But the big deck we played a lot of, and we did not do well against, is the Shurima, Shadow Isles, Kindred Nasus, or just Mono Nasus, a bunch of different versions of the deck. Went 1-4. So we lost to that deck. 4 out of our 8 losses are just Nasus. And the win was on the new build. So the new build beat that, and actually did it pretty decisively, too. So, thoughts? The new build might actually be a lot better. And that's the build you're looking at right now, which is the down a Harrowing, and, down Harrowing, down Evershade, and then up the two Neverglade collectors. So I messed with Neverglade collector and had bad results with it previously, but what I was doing was dropping the Blighted Caretaker, which I think hurts a bit more than Evershade. Evershade's kind of underperformed a fair bit, especially against like Nasus Kindred, where they do have a lot of 3 power to block the Fearsome, so it's a lot weaker lately than it was originally, so dropping that seems fine, and then dropping a Harrowing does improve your draws a fair bit by not having too many high cost cards. So I do think the new build's a lot better, and it did improve that one big matchup we've played a lot. So I do actually have a little more confidence in it, but I haven't been playing a lot of it lately, and that's because I'm 9-2 on Fizzlusives, because the deck is incredibly good, which is my segue into the general meta thoughts. I love that we have new decks. The expansion did bring about new decks. The Nasus deck is actually pretty solid. It is fairly weak into Fizzlusives in my experience. I've been rolling that matchup and rolling a lot of matchups with Fizzlusives lately, partially because people are still experimenting and playing a lot of interesting Shurima stuff, and Fizzlusives is really great at abusing that. I think when I checked last, like 5 or 6 of the top 10 decks for Fizzlusives, so I definitely expect a nerf coming, which is part of the reason I'm playing it so much. Longtime viewers know that I'm a huge fan of Fizz. You can tell from my intro that has the Fizz level up in it. I loved Fizz in League of Legends, so when they brought him to Legends of Runeterra, I was like, it's Fizz, it's my boy from League of Legends. I gotta try him, and I do actually love the way his card works. He is very fragile at times, but the whole super protection aspect of it and all that, I really do love Fizz, so I'm kind of seeing this as my opportunity to get mastery up on Fizz while he's still good and competitive. But I definitely expect nerfs to come because the deck is way too good. It's been good for a long time. You can even see a past, I'll probably put a link at the top of the video right now, where you can see a past version of the deck that I played, or the deck guide I did for it. I may do a new one for it. We'll see. I'm not sure what I'm doing for On the Grind this week so far, so it may be that. I am playing it with stress testing because that deck guide was pre-stress testing days, but definitely playing that. Deck is really, really good, insanely powerful. Other than that, I really like the Lissandra Trundle or Lissandra Tryndamere, like that kind of Freljord Shadow Isles control shell with Lissandra. I do actually really like that a lot. And just in general, I even saw a Shurima version that actually was a lot better than I expected, because I forgot how much removal Freljord has now by itself with the addition of Blighted Ravine, which is actually really good into Fizz elusive. So I can definitely see Lysandra Shells doing really, really well. I may have to look into that deck after all. I was talking it up a bunch prior, but I didn't really dive into it because of the fact that I felt like getting enough ACOS to make it really work was going to be kind of cumbersome and difficult, but I am less concerned about that now, so I may look into playing Lysandra myself. I think it is a good deck. I think it's one you can definitely look into if you particularly like control decks. And then obviously Shurima, Shadow Isles, Nasus, I think is actually a legitimately good deck. I think it's pretty neat and flashy. It's definitely one that I'm going to be looking into more myself, but I do feel like it's a little bit weaker into really broken aggro decks like the Fizzlusive Shell, so I definitely think that deck is very powerful right now. But there are a couple of really interesting decks I want to talk about this week. So first off, we have that Shurima Shadow Isles Nasus deck. I had to talk about it. Basic concept here is that you're going to kill as many units as you can. Your opponent's your own, doesn't matter. You're going to try to get a huge Nasus, slam that down, kill your opponent really quick, because he's fearsome. A lot of decks right now have a hard time blocking him, so you can swing in, do a ton of damage. Then you have Atrocity as well to fling it. You do have things like Vengeance as removal. I particularly like the Kindred version. I know some people are talking about the Thresh version too. I think that's good as well, but I do like the Kindred version for that extra removal, essentially, just by having something die. And Kindred can be very, very hard to deal with. Also worth noting, fun interaction, quote unquote, with Kindred is that if you mark something and then you level up Kindred and then you level up Kindred and then something gets slain again, it will actually mark a new target. So that's cool. Definitely had that cause some problems for me in one game. I'm really not a fan of that interaction, but I do like the addition of Kindred to the deck and what it does for the deck overall. So personally, this is the version I'm looking at. I do know a lot of people are talking about Thresh. That's another great version too. But essentially, your idea is just try to get a huge Nasus and kill your opponent with it. So play a bunch of things, slay a bunch of things, your own or theirs. You got the right to pull out a champion. Mono Nasus has the advantage of that will always be Nasus, but I still think it's fine to run right in the non-Nasus, Mono Nasus version. So this is a list I've seen most common. So that's the one I'm looking at here. Against aggro decks, you're going to want a lot of units. Summoning the Prey is very good because you get 2 blockers for 1, which is very phenomenal, and the 3/1 can trade with most things. Kindred should be good too, because you should be able to slay things a lot, so that she's getting extra kills every turn, and just worry about that more so than winning. Eventually you'll slap a huge Nasus, and they're going to have a hard time dealing with it, but that's what you're basically looking for in that matchup. Against mid-range, again, the 3/1 with Prey is going to be great because it's going to give you a free blocker and Prey, but the 3/1's going to trade with most of their threats because 3 power is enough that even mid-range is a little bit scared. Vengeance is going to be great here too because that's great for just killing their big threats. Nasus is huge because oftentimes their removal's not going to be particularly great, and if you can get a huge Nasus, then you're going to be in even better shape because that's going to be really hard for them to remove, and Atrocity can always make it lethal anyways. So that's kind of the mid-range matchup. Control, that's a little bit sketchier. Try to slay a lot of your own units so you can still get that huge Nasus. And then just like the Nasus Atrocity combo is going to be a great way to close out. So try to be aggressive early, do a ton of damage, then look for that Nasus fling as your primary win condition, essentially. So just try to run them out of resources early. Get that extra bit in, so when you slam that Nasus, you'll be able to fling it for lethal. So you can do Nasus with Atrocity backup in spell mana, so if they have the removal for Nasus right then and there, you fling it and you win. Alright, that's basically how that deck looks, and now I want to talk about something a lot spicier. I lifted this off the top 10 list. I forget who it was that was playing it, so sorry. But I saw this and I'm like, this deck is just so cool. I have to talk about it. Now, I don't have a ton of games on it. I've been mostly playing normals with it, but I wanted to get a basic feel for how the deck worked before I did this video. But ShT Aphelios Targon Shurima Landmark combo mid-range value deck. Essentially, this is basically like the Aphelios decks we saw last season with Twisted Fate, but it has this added advantage of Taliyah. Taliyah is actually a pretty good win condition on her own, because if you can level her up, she's going to be able to deal a ton of damage to your opponent's Nexus, even when blocked. Through ability, she's going to be fairly safe at attacking, too. And then in general, she can be great value, because if you play her and copy a Veiled Temple, it's just so disgusting. I've had 3 Veiled Temples out in a game, and I'm getting so much mana back every turn. It really makes Veiled Temple look more broken than it's ever looked before. We have the added advantage of Preservarium, which is just a really good landmark anyways, because it draws you cards that helps you up to leave even faster. You can use her spell to level up her as fast. Like, I grabbed Noxcria Arena in a game and actually had it be huge. So she's really, really neat. Then obviously we've got the normal Aphelios value. Fangs is back in, which I kind of agree with, because that lifesteal is pretty important. And I even had one game where the Fangs got like huge and it was getting me a ton of life, so that's great. Obviously you still have all that moon weapon value that the deck always had. This is a much weaker crescendum than you would be typically used to, because Boxtopus was an insane crescendum, whereas here you're not going to be able to grab much, and it's not that great, but getting your spell mana back is potentially pretty useful for what the deck's trying to do. Exhaust is pretty good too, especially for getting Nightfall on Aphelios on turn 3, so that's another thing to look out for. But yeah, just generally it is the Aphelios value deck that we saw before, but now it's combined with Shurima and Taliyah, and it's just a really neat, unique deck that not many people are playing, so it's definitely fun to give it a try. I have to very much recommend it. And again, I lifted this off the top 10 leaderboards in Americas at the time that I was looking, which I think was a day or two ago. So apparently it's pretty good in some way. So yeah, it's definitely a deck to look into. Against aggro, you're going to want that lifesteal. You're going to want a lot of units, so things like Duskbringer turn 1. Aphelios can be really good because he can find you lifesteal, he can also find you Calibrum to kill things, he can find you Crescendum, so you can get even more blockers out. Those are all great things. Look for some form of lifesteal, either Fangs. Moon Weapon's okay, but you're only going to get 1 turn out of it, so Fangs or Invoking Sisters is really, really good into those matchups. Against mid-range, just try to outvalue them. That actually shouldn't be that hard. Veiled Temple will make your stuff so hard for them to deal with eventually, and if you can get like a super huge Aphelios, it's going to be very problematic for them. Huge Taliyah is good too, because it can keep attacking and just down your opponent's stuff. Look for a lot of things that can trade well, like the 3-1 is still actually pretty good for trading, so that Traveler can be good too. Obliterate spells are great. Just things like that. Just try to outvalue them. Star Shaping's great win condition against the mid-range match, because it can get you great beyond or Immortal Fire, which should be hard for most mid-range decks to deal with. So that's just basically what you're looking for there. And then in control, aggressive, try to be fast. Look for things like Crescendum, so you have multiple threats out. Try to do a ton of damage early. Getting that 3-1 out early can be really good. Duskbringer turn 1, really good. Just try to outvalue your opponent's stuff. Veiled Temple can be good as well. And finally, that ultimate win condition in the end, you have that Star Shaping for Great Beyond or Immortal Fire. Really good against control, because they need 2 removal to kill both. So look for all of that stuff and just try to run your opponent down best you can. And that's the decks for this week's video. So you can find a link to the decks in the description below if you want to try them out yourself. And other than that, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, leave a like, comment below, and subscribe for more video game or card game related content.